Okay, 8th grade, in lesson 12.1, we're learning about the Pythagorean Theorem. Whenever we have a right triangle, we can use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which means that we have two legs, right? The two legs form the right angle, and the hypotenuse is the side opposite of the right angle. If we take one of the legs and square it, plus the other leg and square it, that is equal to the length of the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so the first thing that I would do if we're going to solve for c here, if we're going to solve for the hypotenuse, is to set up our equation. Our equation is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Next, let's plug in what we know. Well, a and b are the legs, so they are these guys. Now, it doesn't matter which one you call a and which one you call b. Let's call this one leg a, let's call this one leg b. C is always the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. Okay, so for A, let's plug in 12. So I'm going to plug in by putting parentheses around the value. I have 12 squared plus B squared. B is 9, so I have 9 squared equal to C squared. I don't know what C is. That's what I need to solve for. So let's solve this equation. 12 squared, that's 12 times 12, 144, plus 9 squared, 9 times 9 is 81. That's equal to c squared. I add 144 plus 81 and get 225 equal to c squared, but I don't want to know what c squared is. I want to know what just c is, because c is the hypotenuse. So I need to undo the square. What is the inverse operation of a square? That is a square root. I must take the square root of both sides. So the square root of c squared, that would just be c, and the square root of 225, that is 15. So c is equal to 15. C is the hypotenuse. It's the length of the side opposite the right angle. Okay, so in this next problem that I'll do, we are given one of the legs. Let's call this leg A. This is leg B. I'm not given that. I need to solve for B. And I am given C. I'll put HYP, the hypotenuse. So in number 1, I was given leg, and I had to solve for the hypotenuse. But sometimes you'll be given a leg and the hypotenuse, and you'll have to solve for the other leg. So I set up my equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Let's plug in what I know. A is 14, so I have 14 squared plus, I don't know b, so I'm going to leave it as is, b squared equal to c squared. What's c? 23. 23 squared. Okay, 14 squared, that is 196, plus b squared equal to 23 squared is 529. Okay, just like we normally solve equations, I have to get b by itself, so I got to move 196 to the other side by subtracting both sides by 196. When I do that, those 196's cancel. I'm only left with b squared on the left side. On the right side, 529 minus 196 is 333. So I have b squared equals 333. Of course, undo the square by taking the square root of both sides. The square root of b squared would just be b. And the square root of 333 is going to be 18.2. It goes on, but if we're going to round to the nearest tenth, it's 18.2. So we would put b as approximately, since we're rounding, it's approximately 18.2. That's the length of this side. Okay? So whenever you have a right triangle, you can use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, set it up, plug in the values that you know, and solve for the unknown side.